gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So a new poll has come out of New York, the New York Democratic primary for mayor, that shows Zohran Mamdani ahead of Cuomo. The first poll that is showing Zohran to be ahead of Cuomo, which is a big deal. So far, after Cuomo got into the race, which was at a pretty late moment, he has been ahead, comfortably ahead. He had the most name recognition, and it seemed like people were going to be comfortable voting with somebody that they know, despite the fact that he's a crook and that he has a ton of controversy behind him. And he's all around just like not that likable. I think some people do view him as capable, but beyond that, I mean, he doesn't really have a ton of appeal as a politician. But in this poll, Mamdani is beating him 35 to 31%. Mamdani with 35%. So it's been closer to like, I think 37% or something for Cuomo, or maybe more like 35%, but he was ahead. And Mamdani at first was quite a ways behind. Then recently he caught up a lot, really closed the gap just before the debate. And then now he's beating him. Now, this is just one poll. And the way they did this poll was that it did not account for ranked choice voting, which is the way the primary is going to be held. So that is important. The numbers are affected by that in a way that I can't personally account for, but they weren't simulating for ranked choice voting. So that means that, this sample is reflective of your average Democratic voter's likelihood to be interested in Zohran Mamdani. Whether or not it is a reflection of how the actual election would take place is a different thing. But considering that Zohran was much, much behind Cuomo and it looked like Cuomo was going to cruise through this, the fact that he has caught up in a poll that's focused on deciding how people feel between the two, that's a huge deal. And none of the other candidates got even close. The other, I believe her name is Adrienne Adams, was the second choice that AOC endorsed, meaning the person she endorsed to be people's second choice on their ballot, in the ranked choice ballot. She got like 4%. And there's been a bunch of fluffing of her in the media, saying that, New Yorkers would rather have her than Cuomo, trying to position her as, genuinely competitive in this race. She has also been, to be fair, endorsed by Letitia James, who is the prosecutor that went after Trump and ended up getting him prosecuted in his cases in New York involving Stormy Daniels. So, there's definitely some roots to her campaign there. And all of these other candidates are rooted in the community. They do have strong followings, and yet Andrew Cuomo was able to beat them all without doing much of anything, at least in the polls so far. And Zohran Mamdani is beating them all by running an incredible campaign. And at the last debate, there was, some poking and some needling at him, not just from Cuomo, but from the other candidates, saying, well, I didn't know that all I had to do to run for mayor was make great videos. And it's like, well, yeah, that's called campaigning, actually. And the fact that Zohran is able to make really good videos displaying really good policy at a really cost-effective rate, and he's able to spread his message on social media in a really cost-effective way, that's how you run a campaign. If you're not able to keep up with that, and if your policies don't resonate enough with people that they're going viral in the same way that Zohran and his ads are going viral, that's your own fault. That's not some critique about media and social media and, Gen Z loves Zohran Mamdani. That's just how you run a campaign. He's just better at it than you and and he's moving faster than all of you. So we'll see. There's still time for this race to change. Looks like it's pretty much a two-person race between Cuomo and Mamdani, which is quite exciting. But things could change. Lots of things could change, and don't get complacent here or think that this means that we're running away with it. This is one poll, and like I said, it was done in a way that doesn't necessarily reflect what the likely outcome of this primary election is. So the date is coming up, and I believe later today, on Thursday, the second debate is going to happen. So we're going to see more from the other candidates, as well as Zohran and Cuomo going at it, and hopefully they give a little bit more airtime to Zohran this time, considering he is the front runner, or the second to front runner. Last time he did not get very much airtime, and they did spread it evenly between the candidates, but it's also like, come on, none of these candidates, people don't care very much about these candidates. So now that dynamic is pretty much the same in this second round of debates, it's likely that they're going to give Zohran more airtime. It's likely too that they're not, because they don't want him to have more airtime. But we'll see. He seems to be winning and closing the gap despite that. So there's a real chance that Zohran could win this primary election, which does not mean he's going to be mayor, but it means he's going to go on to the general election. So the other thing is that he did an interview on The Breakfast Club. I just want to highlight one clip from that, talk about that for a second, and then we'll move on to some of the other stuff that's going on with the protests in LA and elsewhere. So let's watch this clip real quick.
Now, you also want to cut the police budget, and people are upset about that, right? They feel like crime is all over the place. I think a couple days ago, 2 people got shot in Times Square. The other day, I think another girl got shot in the face in the Bronx. So people are very scared. It seems like New York is getting worse than getting better. So what do you say that, at a time like this, cutting the police budgets, that seems like that is taking more police officers off the street?
I want to be very clear. We are not defunding the police. What we are talking about is sustaining the number of police that we have within the police department. And when I talk to those police officers themselves, they tell me they signed up to join the police force to tackle serious crimes. And yet what they're being asked to do today is serve as mental health professionals and social workers. The same officers who thought they'd be responding to shootings are picking up the 200,000 phone calls a year of mental health calls. And what we've seen elsewhere in the country is you can actually move mental health calls out of the police department. That can reduce the calls that police have to deal with by 20%. And in doing so, you can increase police response time to those major categories of crime. And I think that's important because police have a critical role to play in public safety. And we also need to ask them to just focus on their job and not ask them to do every job. Because what we're seeing right now is these same politicians who have given us this lack of public safety over so many years, telling us that their only answer, no matter the question, is to ask police to do more. I want them to do the thing that they signed up for, and to have a Department of Community Safety with teams of dedicated mental health outreach workers at the top 100 stations with the highest levels of mental health crisis and homelessness. We have to deliver public safety.
And how come y'all haven't found a better way to discuss socialism? Why is socialism a dirty word when essentially all you want to do is take care of people?
I don't think it should be. I think it's actually a word that when you break down its meaning, like you just have done, is one that many Americans agree with. And we've seen that despite all the attempts, Bernie Sanders continues to be one of the most popular politicians in America. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, similarly. And they have both defined themselves in that same language. And I think it's that...
But I think it's because they tell, more so nowadays, instead of just leaning on the word socialism, they just tell people, you should have free healthcare, you should have a free education, you should be able to make a livable wage, they should increase the minimum wage. Like, those are just simple concepts that are all socialism. Yeah. But for some reason, y'all still find yourselves tripping up over that word, or letting the other side use it as a
I think it's because there are a lot of people making a lot of money in this moment who would want Americans to think that that's the only way life can be. And I don't hide this. It's how I see the world. It's the world that I want. It's one of dignity. And it's funny, there's this one guy who comments under almost every one of my tweets, and he's like, he's a socialist. I'm like, yeah, it's in my bio. This is who I am. And I think it's about being honest with New Yorkers. Because I've found, Mayor Koch said this, that if you agree with me on 9 out of 12 issues, vote for me. 12 out of 12, see a psychiatrist. And I found that in New Yorkers, an ability to say, look, maybe I wouldn't call myself the same word, but I want the same things. And ultimately, you have to have a coalition that asks people of just one thing. We need to make the city affordable.
This was a pretty good appearance here from Zohran. Great communicator skills on that guy. He really is quick. I think he speaks like with a ton of fluidity, and he sounds very active, very engaged. He's an exciting candidate. There's no doubt about it. You know, maybe he's not the most casual sounding, at least in this setting. He came off a little bit politician-y, but I think there's a unique pressure associated with being on this program, because, you know, politicians tend to go on this program because they want to reach a black audience, people that are sort of in the hip-hop crowd or a more diverse type of audience, you know, and that is where Zohran is trailing currently. He's trailing with black and Hispanic voters, and this tends to be a problem for, you know, candidates on the more socialist side of the spectrum. I don't think it's necessarily that those demographics are less open to the idea of either socialism or more equitable policies on principle, or even rhetorically. I think it's more so that it takes longer for the message to reach those communities for whatever reason. It's just different communication systems and entertainment systems that they use to get their information, so it's not as quick to reach them as it might be, you know, to reach some of like the white, you know, politically engaged demographics. So especially once you're talking about people who aren't usually politically engaged, trying to get them politically engaged, it's tough. It's not an easy thing for a politician to do, and going out on this grassroots socialist platform demands that you reach voters like that. So overall, this was a good appearance from Zohran. I think he really nails it with these two questions here, and there were good questions that he was getting asked. Envy, the guy who's not Charlemagne here, asked a little bit more right-leaning questions. He kind of just has a more right-leaning perspective. He's a landlord, and he was caught up in like a big scandal, like essentially being a slumlord, where he had some like federal charges potentially. I think it was the guy that he was working with that actually got federally charged, but it was definitely business that he was associated with, and you know, it was a big deal for Envy for a second. It looked like he was going to get caught up in some shit, and he still might. But yeah, I mean, he comes from the perspective of somebody that doesn't want a politician who is going to freeze the rent. But, you know, that being said, he doesn't step on the interview too much, and Zohran really lays out his platform. The main criticism that Charlemagne is giving him here, which I think is valid, it's the perspective of somebody who tends to agree with the democratic socialist type, but isn't necessarily tapped in with those communities or those networks of communication. And so to him, the problem is not that socialism is bad and they need to avoid the word because socialism is bad. He's saying that they tend to get tripped up on it, and that socialism, that they have allowed the word socialism to become a bad word, and that is the biggest mistake that politicians like him and AOC make, which I don't think is that accurate of an assessment, because the reality is that it is the conservatives and the right wing that politicizes that word and really takes any policy, even going back to Reagan talking about welfare queens, you know, they'll take any policy and call it socialism. That's their playbook, and it works because there's a long history of fear-mongering over socialism and communism in America. And so it's potent. You start poking at those rhetorical buttons, and it works. It gets people animated, and it gets people very indignant over the idea of socialism, even people that you wouldn't expect. So his critique here is that you should focus on the policies that people agree with, which is, say you want to give people free healthcare, say you want to give people free college, say you want to give people free water or free bus fare. And I think that's an accurate critique. I think Zohran does a great job of doing that. I don't know that that's the most accurate critique of Zohran necessarily, but what he's referring to, I think, is that he felt that Zohran was speaking a political language and sort of dancing around the ideas of socialism or even his policies. Maybe he was over-explaining a little bit. At least that seemed to be what Charlemagne was getting at. And so on the whole, I think he's right. I think focusing on those policies, not letting anybody distract you from continuing to talk about the policies that are most important. That's exactly what Bernie Sanders did in 2016, and it worked extremely well. Nobody is better at staying on message than Bernie Sanders. He doesn't overcomplicate it. He's good at elaborating and explaining. He's good at using language that people can connect to on an emotional level, but he really just repeats that policy platform over and over again. And because of that, people have a really strong association with Bernie Sanders to those ideas. And that's important because it's true that a lot of left-leaning and left-wing politicians lack that. They lack any strong association with them and what their policy platform is. And so that allows other bad actors, people on the right, and competitors within their field to paint them a certain way. And then that creates a mixed impression among the electorate. So ultimately, I think Zohran's doing a good job. And look, all the timing of this stuff is working great. The first poll that had Zohran closing the gap with Cuomo was right before the debate, and then AOC endorsed him after that. And then now, just before this second debate, there's a poll that shows Zohran beating Cuomo. So I mean, again, none of this is indicative of the fact that Zohran's going to run away with it, but it means that there's real momentum. And I think he can pull it out, and he's just got to keep running the type of campaign that he's running. And yeah, stick to what works. Stick to repeating those policies that people want to hear. Freeze the rent, free bus rides, and childcare. That is Zohran's platform. It's a winning platform. So remember, don't rank Cuomo on your ballot at all. Rank Zohran number one. Voter registration ends on Saturday if you're in New York, so get registered on Saturday. Encourage others to get registered by Saturday. Talk to people, phone bank, do everything that you can. Zohran winning, even just winning this primary, would be a huge victory for the left, and it could be a real page-turning moment when it comes to the political situation in America. So speaking of that, we're going to pivot to talking about some of the protest stuff that's going on. LA still very active. A curfew has been on for the last couple days to keep people out of the streets. However, people are still out there, and the confrontations with police and just general occupying of the streets has continued into the night. So there is some footage of clashes happening between protesters. The LAPD has been bringing the horses out, and they're using these horses to like kick people around and stomp on people. And you see them with the batons here. This is right out front of City Hall, right in the middle of the day. You also have a lot of activity in Seattle happening right now. So you got the riot cops out, and Seattle is fighting as much as they can against the police. Now, the Seattle police has said they're not going to cooperate with ICE, and the police departments in LA have said the same thing for the most part in different ways. And that's purely because of pressure. Understand that. So even though these people are still fighting the police, that's because guess what? The ICE presence is still there in Seattle, and people are resisting that, and the police are still getting in the way, even if they are supposedly not assisting ICE. So at the end of the day, continuing to apply pressure on the police force and ICE, whether it's in Seattle or somewhere else, is the right move. Even if they capitulate and say, we're not going to assist on ICE raids, that's not enough. We need these cities to use every resource possible to get ICE out of the cities. And keep in mind, these are spreading a lot. And so this is like the worst case scenario for the administration and for the authorities, because this type of pressure being applied across the nation in many places at once is what they can't handle. What they could potentially handle is an uprising in LA or something, one city that tries to make a stand against them. They cannot handle everybody at once, especially if people keep coming, if people don't give up, because look, there's going to be an escalation of force that's used at these protests. It's already happening. They're gearing up. The reason this hasn't gotten that intense yet on the part of the police, even though they're arresting a lot of people and being incredibly violent, is because they're gearing up. They're getting ready for that, and they're rallying the troops and they're rallying their resources. So this fight is going to continue, but it's very encouraging to see that people are continuing to get out in the streets across the country, and it's working. I have to say, this is working. People are doing things like showing up at the hotels where ICE is staying, applying pressure on the hotels to get ICE out. This worked in LA. This got ICE out of one of the hotels they were staying. Here is another hotel, and them protesting out front on Wednesday, again during the day. I don't believe they've left that location yet, but look, the protests in the streets and the confrontations with the cops, that stuff is good because it applies pressure, but this needs to be happening at the same time. Going to where they are and preventing the city from harboring them and preventing them from smoothly undertaking their operations, figuring out where they're going to be and being there first, figuring out where they're staying and causing a ruckus. This is what's making it actually difficult for them to do what they're trying to do. So, really important to continue doing that. And again, like, it is scary, the idea that if you really get in their way, they're going to hit you back 10 times harder. If we're doing that across the nation, they don't have infinite personnel. They don't. And especially as this goes on, the willpower of the people that they do have, or that they're trying to get convinced to do this, is going to whittle away. You already have reports of ICE not showing up to work in some cases. So this is working. And the best advice I can give you, as non-politically correct as it might be, is don't listen to the people who are telling you that these protests have to be quote-unquote non-violent, or people who are pushing back against the tactics that some protests are using to directly confront the police or the authorities in general. There's a lot of people who are stepping in to say that these protests need to be tamped down, they need to be controlled, they need to be happening under controlled circumstances. Protesters need to be doing things like sitting down in the streets with their hands up, not confronting the police, etc. Understand, the only reason this is working is because people aren't doing that. Because people are extremely angry and they're not afraid to be disruptive. None of these protests are going anywhere, and none of these protests do anything unless they are disruptive. Even if you're talking about peaceful tactics, that's great. Come up with peaceful tactics, but those tactics have to be disruptive. If they're not disruptive, nobody cares, and certainly nobody feels any pressure to acquiesce. There have been thousands and thousands and thousands of people out in the streets protesting Donald Trump on many occasions. No kings, and grab them by the pussy, and the pink hats, and from anything you could imagine. It's happened countless times. It never, ever creates any real momentum until people are willing to get disruptive and, yes, get destructive. And I've said before, I'm not in favor of tearing up communities, but I am in favor of doing things that forces police and the federal authorities to use their resources and to show all of us in the light of day that they do not have infinite resources. And we have much closer to infinite manpower than they do. And that is ultimately the only way that concessions are going to be won. If you're serious about getting ICE out of these cities, if you're serious about interrupting the Donald Trump administration and this horrific Project 2025 agenda, that means you have to support any means necessary to get it done. And Democrats and people who want only, organized, peaceful protests, that's great. Do whatever you're going to do, but stay out of the way. Because these protests, as of right now, are working. And yes, it's dangerous, but the more people do this, and the longer it goes on, and the longer it's sustained, the much higher the chance is that we win. They cannot overpower the amount of people who are against their agenda. And people are realizing that. So if we keep the momentum going and stop trying to tamp down the protests in favor of creating more news favorable images, then we're gonna win this. But if we start infighting and start with narratives that are gonna cause these protests to be less effective and less disruptive, we're gonna lose fast. So that's all I have to say for now. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting different kinds of stuff there, like podcasts that don't make it to the main channel, book reviews, movie reviews. I'm reading Catcher in the Rye right now. I'm probably going to review that on there. Also posting music early. I've got a couple EPs out that were available first for members only. Right now, there's a couple tracks on there. There's a freestyle by me and my buddies Wrecked and Psych. So if you want access to all that, different podcasts and other stuff, become a member. And if there's other kinds of content that you'd like to see for members only stuff, then let me know and we'll work some things out.